What's going on, everybody? So, over the last several videos, we've looked at all of my different QRP field radios. Some of them aren't even really QRP, but we kind of wanted to come up with some winners, both for CW only and for all mode type radios. And oddly enough, the winners both ended up being Elecraft. Now, when I went into this, I had absolutely no idea that that's how this was going to go. But there were some specific reasons why these two radios kind of came out on top. So, with the KNX1, this particular radio, it's ancient. I mean, they haven't made this thing in a very, very long time. But it's got some features that kind of made it stand out from the rest of my QRP CW only radios, right? I mean, it's got adjustable gains. Now, the SW3B did as well, but this guy's got an adjustable filter. It's got an internal tuner. It does have the ability to take internal batteries, although the internal battery option of this thing's pretty bad, right? I mean, those AA's don't last very long. I may try to set something else up inside this, either with, I've got some lithium iron phosphate AA's that I might try to rig up a tray in here to use. They're way higher voltage though, so I can't use 6 of those, so I have to figure something else out. But this radio had some features that kind of made it stand out from the pack, right? When compared to the rest of those radios, it's not as small and as light as the MTR3B. It's not. I don't think the receiver's quite as good maybe as the MTR4B. It's definitely not as cheap as the SW3B. I mean, this is the most expensive QRP CW radio I own. I've seen these things going for just ridiculous amounts of money lately. But at the end of the day, it does have some features that kind of make it stand apart. Now, a KH1 might give this a run for its money. In fact, it should give it a run for its money. I'm just not sold on the particular, at least the use case for myself, right? I'm not going to be doing a lot of pedestrian mobile CW, I don't think. I'm going to give it a shot. My buddy has one and he offered to send it to me to give it a try. So I may take him up on that. So Eric, I appreciate the offer. And if I do take you up on that, I promise you I will be very careful with your radio. But that's probably the only way I'm going to get my hands on a KH1 anytime soon. But again, this radio had a feature set that kind of made it stand apart from the rest of those radios. Get my light over here a little better. And there's just something special about this radio. Again, they haven't made it in a really long time. This thing's an ancient radio, comparatively speaking, when it comes to this style radio. But, it's got a feature set that just kind of set it apart. And the same thing kind of goes for this KX2, right? I mean, this KX2 may not be the best radio made, but the feature set that this radio has, that glare is really bad. Let's use the tall leg. The feature set that this radio has, again, it kind of stands apart from my other field radios because it is just such a complete shack in a box, right? I mean, your internal battery, internal speaker, internal mic, internal tuner, it'll run pin diode switching, and it runs CW, it runs single sideband, it'll do digital. This radio kind of does everything. Now, is it perfect? No, we talked about that in our other videos, right? We said, the external build quality is not that great. The sound quality is decent, but I don't think it's as good as some of my other radios. But at the end of the day, it's hard to find a radio that has this much packed into a device this small. This thing is not terribly big. So here's, to give you a comparison, here's the KX1, which is not a terribly big radio. Right, and you can see that the KX2, especially when I took the side rails and the heatsink off, is not a tremendous amount larger, right? But it's twice as much power. It's got a much better tuner. It does modes other than CW. It's more bands, right? So, like I said, these two radios kind of ended up winning, not because they're necessarily the best radios ever, but I think they're the most complete packages out of the radios that I own. And it would be really hard like I said, between this and let's say the MTR3B, because the MTR3B is so small, this radio just has some features that doesn't have. You know, generally speaking, I'm probably more likely to carry that MTR3B because it is so tiny. And while it's expensive and hard to get, it's not as expensive and hard to get as this. But like I said, there's just something about this particular radio that makes it stand apart. And again, like I said, same thing kind of goes for this KNX2, right? I mean, it's got everything you need in a field radio and really nothing you don't. So like I said, I'm not really going to pit these two radios against each other because it's not really fair. I mean, we're talking two very different radios, even though they're from the same manufacturer. You know, these two radios are for two very different groups of people. This radio is for everybody. This radio is for weirdos like me who are willing to buy a CW-only radio that's been out of production for a very long time that is kind of compromised and weird and quirky. But like I said, if you're a CW-only op, this is really a great radio. But if you want to do, and this, you can listen to single sideband on this, but it won't transmit on single sideband. You can open the filter. You can tune it up to the single sideband portion of the bands, open that filter up, and you can listen to single sideband, but you can't transmit on it. As with this radio, it kind of does everything, right? So, like I said, this video, I'm not going to put these two radios head to head because again, that really wouldn't be fair. You know, they're two very different radios for two very different types of people. At the end of the day, if you had to choose one of these radios, just, you know, buy a KNX2. You can go buy one of these right now. These are hard to find. When you do, they're very expensive. And again, you're very limited. I mean, the base radio is only 2 bands, no tuner, no nothing. If you're going to buy one with at least the 3 bands, the 20, 30, 40, 80. Like I said, I've said in other videos, 80 is kind of not something I find super useful in a field radio. Like I said, that might change when we get towards the bottom of the solar cycle and those low bands, you know, are kind of the way to go. Maybe I'll set up a vertical with a coil and run 80. I don't know. But like I said, at the end of the day, this is more radio for more people. This is a niche radio for weirdos like me who want quirky little CW radios and are willing to spend obscene amounts of money on radios that haven't been made in a really long time. At the end of the day, what you buy out of any field radio is going to kind of be up to you, right? You're going to have to look at what you value as far as price, size, weight, features, modes, bands, all those different kinds of things, and then come up with a solution that fits your needs, right? I'm not saying that this is the radio for everybody. I'm certainly not saying that this is the radio for everybody. This is definitely not the radio for everybody. All right. But like I said, you know, use these videos, these QRP head-to-head videos, just as sort of a jumping off point, right? It gives you some ideas as to what radios are out there and what some of the features are, what some of the advantages are, what some of the disadvantages are. You know, all these radios have drawbacks. None of them are perfect. And this series is just to kind of give you a feel for what you might want to look at when you go to buy a radio. Now, I've made other field radio videos. I've got a basic field radio video, and then I've got one specifically on the displays. And then I have the one I did with my Activator series, which I went through all the different radios. But that was a single video where I blasted through a whole bunch of different radios. In this series, I wanted to give us a little bit deeper dive without going crazy into all these different radios so that you can make a more informed decision when you go to pick one up, because these things aren't cheap, right? Even the cheapest radio I have here, you know, if you take out the True SDX, which probably isn't a rig you're going to want to use as your sole rig, and if you're not going to be a CW op, the cheapest radio we've got here that is probably usable for most people is going to be that G90, which is a fantastic radio, but it's still, you know, they're $400 and change dollars. That's quite a bit of money to spend on something if you're not sure it's something you want to do, right? You know, you may get out there and say, you know what, maybe this field activation stuff really isn't for me. So, you know, don't go out and buy a $1,600 field radio like this until you know it's something you really want to spend money on. And understand that all of these radios, even the 20 watt ones, they're still fairly low power. You know, you're gonna have to work for those QSOs probably. It's not gonna be like going out there with a 100 watt radio. It's gonna be harder. So, but for me, that's some of that challenge is some of what makes this so enjoyable, right? You kind of have to work for those QSOs. I've got to make sure my antenna works. You know, I've got to make sure that I'm in a place where my signal is going to get out. You know, I like to choose modes. That's why I like CW, because CW works when nothing else does. Well, okay, FT8 would, but then I got to carry, at a bare minimum, you know, like the FX4CR on my phone, and then it ties my phone up doing FT8, so I can't log on it or do anything else on it. Well, I guess I could, but it would be kind of a pain in the butt. So you need a computer or a tablet or whatever. But, you know, like I said, don't go out and buy one of these as your first radio. Well, I mean, I guess you could go out and buy this as your first radio and use it in the shack. But like I said, before you go out and spend huge amounts of money on a field radio, find out if it's something you actually enjoy first. You may get out there and be like, you know what, this really isn't for me. And that's cool. You might just want to stay in your shack and hunt, right? You could hunt parks. You could be a shack sloth on soda, or you could not do any of those. You could rag chew or work DX. That's one of the cool things about ham radios. There are a lot of different things you can do within the hobby. I mean, you can, you know, you don't have to work HF. You know, there's nothing wrong with staying a technician. You can work, you know, UHF, VHF, and then even on tech, you've got, you know, 10 meters, and you got CW portions of 40 and 15, right? So, you know, you've got a lot of options out there. But like I said, at the end of the day, if you know you're going to do field activations, that's something you really want to do, and you're looking for, you know, a radio that can pretty much do everything. If you can buy a KNX2 for a reasonable amount of money, go ahead and do it. Just keep in mind that not all of these are going to come with an internal tuner and an internal battery, and all those are all options. All right. So much like the KNX1, right? This is a 4-band radio with a tuner. The base radio is 2 bands, no tuner. This thing's the same way, right? A base radio, no internal battery, no internal tuner, no internal battery charger, no internal clock. Now, this radio does not have the internal charger in it yet. You'll notice you don't see the little yellow LED there. I will put one in this eventually. They're not available right now. I should have bought one when they were, but I was kind of broke. And so that's one of the disadvantages of being a teacher. You're broke all summer. So I have plenty of time to do activations. But when the internal charging modules were available, I was like, I don't want to spend that much money right now. And now that I have the money, they're not available. So I got to wait until they come back into some form of availability. But like I said, the idea behind this series was just to kind of give you an idea as to what you might want to look at when you go to buy a field radio. And again, it wasn't really necessarily about picking winners and losers. I just kind of did that for fun. It was more about showing you what you might want to look at before you go out and spend your hard-earned money on a radio to do this kind of stuff. And you may find that you might need more than one radio depending on what you're doing, right? I mean, I own a whole pile of them. Now, do I need all these radios? Absolutely not. I don't. I could get away with just a couple of them, right? I mean, if I had to get rid of everything except for a few of them, I'd probably keep the KNX2. I'd probably keep the MTR3B. I'd probably keep like the TX500, maybe the FX4CR, and I could probably let the rest of them go if I had to. That would cover my bases for pretty much everything. I'd have this guy that does everything, the TX500 for inclement weather, the FX4CR if I wanted higher power output or if I wanted to run digital, and then that MTR3B for just a little QRP CW rig that I can throw in my backpack and carry into the woods. So again, like I said, at the end of the day, there's not going to be a single perfect radio for everybody. You know, look at other people's reviews, what they think of the radios. Just remember, take things with a grain of salt. Some people are sponsored by some of these companies, and they're going to, I'm not going to say they're going to shill for them, but they're going to promote that product because they're being paid to promote that product, right? I'm not. Nope, I paid for every single radio, every key, every cable, every antenna, everything I have. I've paid for it 100% myself. All right. And so when I give you my observations on these radios, understand that they're my opinions, and they're only my opinions. Somebody else might disagree with me, and that's fine. But also understand that they're not being influenced by the companies. Elecraft did not pay me to make these videos. I assure you. I've talked enough crap about Elecraft radios. There's no way on earth they're going to send me free radios or pay me to talk about their radios. But like I said, at the end of the day, you know, look at what other people have to say about the radios, make an informed decision, spend your money wisely, and most importantly, get out in the field and have some fun. If you've never gone out and done one of these activations, just do it. Don't be afraid. You know, if you're going to do single sideband, just pick that mic up, key it up, and call CQ. If you're going to do CW, you know, if you're brand new and you think you might want to run CW, start learning now. You know, there's a lot of different great ways you can go about learning CW. I'm going to make some videos about what I think are some of the better ways to go about learning CW here. But, you know, don't be afraid of it. Don't have key fright. Don't be afraid to hit the key. Get out there, make some beeps. All right, everybody. So, and if you're a digital op, that's cool too, right? Fire up the computer, make some cues, get some contacts, just, get out there and have some fun. That's what this is all about at the end of the day. This is a fun hobby. This I don't go out in the field solely to do activations. Normally I'm going out to hike or kayak or mountain bike or something else, and I bring a radio along with me and I go do an activation, right? I'm not one of those guys that sits out there all day and makes 300 QSOs at the park, sitting at a park bench. I go out in the woods, I set my radio up, I make some QSOs, and then I pack everything up, put it back in my backpack, and go about doing whatever it was I set out to do to begin with. That's just how I operate. Whatever you want to do, that's entirely up to you. If you're doing soda, obviously, unless they're drive-up sodas, you're going to be hiking. So that's just part of the game. But like I said, whatever you find fun, go out and do it. But get out there, make some QSOs, have some fun. And like I said, when you go to buy your first field radio or you're going to buy another field radio, look at some of these things that I talked about. Think about the advantages, the disadvantages, how you're going to use that radio, and then buy a radio that's going to fit those needs. All right, everybody. So thank you so much for watching all these videos. I really appreciate it. This has been a fairly long series, but I wanted it to be fairly informative. I didn't want to give you overloads with information, but I wanted you to give you enough information so that you could understand what these radios were about and make decent decisions about purchasing radios in the future. So, like I said, I'm going to do some videos here in a little bit in the next month or so about specifically learning CW, Morse code, some of the things you should probably do, some of the things you probably shouldn't do, some of the ways I think are probably the best to go about it, and some of the places you can go to learn more, or some of the apps and things like that you can use. And I'm going to get out and try to do some other activations that I don't normally do. Normally I go out and operate CW. I'm going to go out and do some more single sideband activations. I haven't done a single sideband activation other than a couple of contacts for the Parks in the Air Plaque event and a couple of contacts for my 1FX4CR video. I haven't done a single sideband activation in almost a year. Today's December 10th, 2023, and my last single sideband activation that was solely single sideband, or where I made more than just a few QSOs, was New Year's Day of this year. So it's been almost a year. So I'm going to get out and do some other things. I'll get out and do some more digital. I might go out and try to do some wacky stuff, like do some activations on, JS8 call or Vera AC or other oddball digital modes that most people don't use. Most people fire up FT8 and call it a day, or maybe FT4. Maybe I'll go a little weird and do some digital modes that people don't normally use and see if we can get any QSOs that way. But at any rate, like I said, those videos will be coming out in the near future here, and I'll intersperse that with as many activation videos as I can. I'll try to kind of keep the channel rolling with both activation type videos as well as more informative videos like this. I don't want to pigeonhole myself into just being a CW channel, even though that's primarily how I operate. I want this channel to be for everybody. I don't want it to just be for CW ops, and I don't necessarily just want it to be for HF people either. Like, if I can, it's hard for me to do UHF, VHF contacts around here. There's not much on Simplex. But even if I can get out and make some UHF, VHF contacts in some of these activations, I'm going to do it, just because there are a lot of people where, their radio might be an HT. That might be what they have to use. And, especially if you're out west, you get up on a summit with a decent antenna, you can do a SOTA activation with, a VHF handheld. So, like I said, I'm going to try to get out and do some other things that I don't normally do, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to get away from my CW activations. That'll primarily be what I'll do. Is my channel will primarily be CW and CW activations with a lot of this stuff thrown in as well. So again, sorry if I'm rambling. I just had a lot of random things that I wanted to talk about. Again, I really appreciate everybody watching. Like I said, I hope you found this series informative. And until the next one, as always, thank you so much. 7-3.